So first of all, we're learning Yoma and we're on Daf Yud Gimel, and we're going to start in the middle of the Amud where we left off last week. But I just want to give you an easy segue into the sugya for tonight. There was a machlokas recorded in the Mishnah between the Chachamim and Rabbi Yehuda about the Kohen Gadol entering into Yom Kippurim. Should he have a second wife just in case? Just in case, not a very happy just in case, meaning just in case his first wife dies, and the Torah says v'chiper bi'ad beso, that he's got to be married. So we have a second string wife waiting in the wings just in case. And the Chachamim argued that, look, Rabbi Yehuda, if you're concerned about the death of the Kohen Gadol's wife, then how do you know the second wife is not going to die? And if you establish the second, how do you know a third and a fourth and a fifth? Ein l'davar sof. And therefore the Chachamim rejected Rabbi Yehuda, and there's no need, and the halacha doesn't require setting up a second wife. I always say one wife is enough. In any event, now the Gemara is going to ask another kasha on Rabbi Yehuda, raise another objection to Rabbi Yehuda. So if we're looking inside, we're on Daf Yud Gimel Amud Aleph, and we begin in a line. You may find this easy to locate. It's halfway down the Amud. The line begins with the word di'avdinon, di'avdinon. And if you have the same Tzuras Hadaf that I have, you'll see it gets wide towards the bottom. And if you count up from the wide lines, you'll see about 6 or 7 lines up. Umi sagi le betakanta. Rabbi Yehuda, is it really so that by establishing a second wife, you have solved your problem? Beso amar Achmana, v'hach lav besohi. Let's explain. The Gemara is establishing that there are 2 parts to Jewish marriage. There's what's called Erusin, and then there's Nisuin. With Erusin, she doesn't enter into his house. She still remains in the house of her father. And back in the day, they would separate between Erusin and Chuppah or Nisuin for about a year, 12 months. You know that. And during that 12-month period, she lived in her father's house. The word Beso, in the context of the Avodas Kohen Gadol, which you'll see in Parshas Achrei Mos, there the Torah says Beso. Beso means that she's already married him, fully married him. The Gemara is now assuming that Lav Beso, that although he might have given her a tabas, he gave her something that's Shava Pruta, and he said, she's already an arusa, but she's not an asua. Now, the Kohen Gadol, in order to serve in the Beis Hamikdash and do the avoda of Yom Kippurim, he's got to have a wife. He has one wife, but we're worried that maybe lest Chas v'Shalom she'll die, he's got to have another wife. And the Gemara is assuming at this point, and we'll see how the Gemara backtracks from this position, that when they set up a second wife, all that they have is Erusin. They do not have Nisuin. And the Torah says Beso. Beso means after she's entered into his domain, his house, and that's after Chuppah, after Nisuin. So what good, how have you solved your problem? You're worried about the possibility that maybe his first wife will pass on, and therefore he doesn't have Beso. And that's a precondition in his ability to serve as a Kohen Gadol on Yom Kippur and bring the kapar for Klal Yisrael. Well, guess what? His second wife that you've established is not Beso. She's not Ishto in the full sense. She's only after Erusin. In other words, he's designated her for 2 stages. Stage number 1 will be Kedushin, and stage number 2 will be this. Now, let's ask the following question. When Rabbi Yehuda says that we have to designate a second wife for the Kohen Gadol, is it just that we designate this woman She's in the wings. She's, as we'd say in American baseball, she's waiting on deck, or has the marriage begun to be effectuated? So the Gemara says, Dimakadishle. Rabbi Yehuda doesn't mean to say that she's waiting on the deck circle and no official marriage relationship has begun between the Kohen Gadol and the second wife. This is, by the way, before Cherem D'Rabbeinu Gershom. So we're not talking about a problem of marrying two wives. Dimakadishle. Yeah, but the Gemara says, as we indicated earlier, that's not enough. That's not sufficient. The Torah says Beso. As long as he hasn't taken her into the chuppah and completed the process of ishus, of making a full nisuin, la Beso, she's not a bias. So that even in an event that if his first wife dies, he is now going to continue the avoda because he has a second wife, but she's not really his wife, because all that happened here was kiddushin. There was no nisuin. There was no chuppah. And if there's no chuppah, then guess what? It's not besa. And he cannot achieve a kapar. He cannot serve as a kohen. So the Gemara answers the concept. Wow, we really went from one extreme to the other. We thought that according to Rabbi Yehuda, all that happens here is that she's designated. Then we went a step further and we said, no, he was Makadish. And now we're going one step further, Kanisla, which means that he took her into the chuppah, there was the suin, and she's fully based. The Gemara says now we're really in trouble because now he's married to two women. That per se is not a problem, but it's a problem for the Kohen Gadol when he does the avodah on Yom Kippur to have more than one wife. Why? Im kain havile shnei batim. So Abosai, for the balance of the shir, we have to memorize and let that phrase sink into our brains. Shnei batim. The Torah says Beso, which means he has one bias, one wife, Beso Zuishla. But it excludes two wives, which is Batim. And the Gemara says, therefore, Havile Shnei Batim. In other words, we're caught between a rock and a hard place. On the one hand, in an event that his first wife dies, he has to have Beso, which means he's got to be married with a full-fledged Nisuin to this other woman. Otherwise, he can't serve. On the other hand, if he's married, fully married to a second wife, then again he can't serve because the Torah says beso, which means one bias and not two batim. And now he has two batim. And if you're going to reduce it to one bias, then you haven't solved your problem, meaning Rabbi Yehuda's problem, namely that maybe she'll die and then he's left with no batim. So how do we orchestrate this in such a way that we guarantee that he has one bias, not zero, but not two batim, only one bias? And it seems absolutely impossible to guarantee that, because if you're going to be afraid that his first wife dies, then he's without a bias. What are you going to say? But he has a second bias. He doesn't have a second bias because if he married the second woman, then he's got two batim. We're really in a maze. You know, we got to find a way out of this maze. Rachmana Amar v'kiper biado ubiad beso. Beso is in lashon yachid; it's in the singular. V'lo biad shnei batim. He cannot be married to two women. In this context of serving as Kohen Gadol to achieve kapar. Now, here I want to share with you an insight of what's called the Siach Yitzchak. He lived about 150 years ago in Lithuania. It could be that some of his descendants moved to South Africa. I don't know. Anyway, this Siach Yitzchak says the following. Why does the Torah exclude Shnei Batim in the case of the Kohen Gadol? Why does the Torah insist? And what's the meaning that Beso has to be one bite. I mean, if he's got two batim, all the merrier. That's even greater. That's even more of a kapara. He wants to be mechaper not only for Beso one batis for his wife, he wants to bring kapara for two wives, for two batim. And furthermore, he says that in general, when the Torah uses the word bias, it doesn't necessarily mean one and not two. You have to have some compelling reason why we darshan that bias means bias echad v'lo shnei bat. What is that compelling reason? And if anyone here wants to mute their microphone, that's really fine with us. Would be very well appreciated because we're hearing some interruptions. Anyway, getting back to the Siach Yitzchak, he says the following. He says, Efshar sheyelo shtei noshim v'kavanas hakosuv she'eno yochel lechaper al achas mihen. He says the following to bolster his question. Could be that the Torah says Bayis Echad V'lo Shnei Batim, but what the Torah means to say is that he can only effectuate a kapara for one wife, but not for two wives. That doesn't mean that he can't be married to two wives. Let him be married to two wives, and when the Torah says V'chiper B'yad Beso, it means that he will engender a kapara on behalf of one of those two wives. And let's assume that it means his primary wife. He's got the second wife that he only took in order to guarantee in the event that his first wife dies, he's got a bias. But the Torah is only saying that he can effectuate kapara for one single bias, even if I accept your drasha of bias echad. That doesn't tell me that the Kohen is completely disqualified because he has two batim. We're not talking about whether he qualifies or not. Let him have 1,000 batim. Let him be like Shlomo Melech, plenty of wives. But the Torah is saying, v'chiper, his power to be effective as a Kohen Gadol, first and foremost, on behalf of his bias, is limited to one bias. That doesn't mean that the Kohen is ipso facto disqualified to serve as a conduit to bring about Kaparas Yom Kippurim just because he has more than one wife, more than one bias. Very intriguing question here of the Siach Yitzchak. Now let's keep in mind, Rabbosai, that the Kohen Gadol on Yom Kippurim, which is Sugyas way later on in Yoma, had three different viduyim. His first vidui was on behalf of Beso. His second was on behalf of all of the Kohanim. And his third was on behalf of all Klal Yisrael. And there are many intricate halachas and details about how to effectuate these three viduyim. He says the following. He says, the first vidui is the vidui for Beso. And the vidui for Beso is meant to effectuate a full kapara for Beso. Now watch what happens. If the Torah is saying that he can only effectuate kapara for one of his two wives because it says bias echad, the Torah is therefore saying that if he's married to two wives, his vidui is ineffective. Do you hear this? This is a pella of a chidush of the Siach Yitzchak. He's claiming that it's not just the inability of the Kohen Gadol to achieve kapar for both of his wives, but rather it's an ineffective vidui. The vidui itself is ineffective. Why? Because the vidui has to be a complete vidui, And a complete vidui means on behalf of one wife. Are you with me here, Abosa? Again, there's a whole chadgadya here. He's operating with one premise on top of the other. If we break it down, he's got at least 3 different premises in order to explain this Gemara. Premise number 1 is that what's at stake here is whether or not the Kohen Gadol could function on Yom Kippur as the Kohen Gadol. Premise number 2, every single one of his viduyim are critical to his responsibility to function as the Kohen Gadol. If you disqualify one of his viduyis, then he's ois kapelish macha. He's not a Kohen Gadol. Gigantic premise. Now comes the real premise, the breakthrough revolution. The Torah is saying that vidui could only be effective for one woman, v'chiper biad beisa. And now he's got 2 women. He's married to 2 batim. His vidui is not going to be effective. Not the way we understood it in the kasha. When we asked the question, we thought, all right, maybe his vidui will effectuate a kapara for one of his 2 wives, but not for the other. No. It goes way beyond that. The vidui has to reach its potential. And its potential is to achieve kapara for his household. And that means 1 wife and not 2. If he cannot effectuate a vidui and a kapara for both of his wives, then his vidui is invalid. And now we go
not
to the
even
next
for
premise.
himself.
If the vidui is invalid, then he can't serve as a Kohen Gadol. What do you say, Yisrael? Yeah.
I said it wouldn't be effective even for himself, according to
Not
this
even for
line of
himself.
thinking.
He's not a Kohen Gadol. Again, anyone can do tshuva and vidui on Yom Kippur, but the role of the Kohen Gadol is to effectuate what's called itzumo shel yom, a separate kapara that's inherent in the sanctity of the day. And in order to do so, he has to play a role as a Kohen Gadol. But now we're saying much more than that. He has to play a role as a Kohen Gadol for every single vidui, and each vidui has to be potential to reach its complete fruition. And therefore, if he cannot effectuate a kapara through his vidui for both of his wives, then his vidui is worthless as far as Yom Kippur is concerned, and therefore the man cannot serve as a Kohen Gadol. This is an amazing, amazing chiddush that I wanted to share with you because I got very excited about this. And it's the Siach Yitzchak. And I have to tell you that one of the later Achronim, the Sfas Emes, the Ger Rebbe, and now we're turning back the clock about 120, 130 years ago, he was not thrilled about this Siach Yitzchak. And he says, Halo ashniya yesh lo kapar b'videi hasheni shetia al kol hakol. What bothers the Sfas Emes? He presses a very interesting button here. He says that any woman who's married to the Kohen Gadol has the status of a Kohen. To be more precise, a Kohenes. And if for whatever reason, one of his wives did not achieve her kapara through the first vidui, she automatically falls into the second vidui, which is the vidui for the Kohen. And therefore, there's no person who is excluded from the kapara of the viduyim of this Kohen Gadol. Even in effect, if he's married to more than one woman, so Beso, his first vidui will only be effective vis-a-vis his first wife. But it doesn't mean that the Kohen Gadol is now excluded and disqualified from achieving a vidui and a kapara for a second wife. How so? Because when he gets to vidui number 2, the vidui of the Kohanim, she's included in the vidui of the Kohanim because she's an Ashes Kohen. She's married to a Kohen. Wow. So the Sfas Emes comes up with a new shot in this Gemara. And I'm going to read it to you because I don't understand what he's saying, but maybe you'll explain it to me. He says the following. Kaparas beso kodemes lekaparas hakohanim mishum sheyovo zakai v'yechaper alachai. Uitam zeh tzarich lechaper al kol nashav below dai bekapara al isha achas. He says an amazing chiddush, which again I don't have it, so I can't sell it to you because I haven't bought it myself. Like one of my friends said to me, I can't convince you to take the vaccine because I'm not convinced myself. That's what he told me. I mean, I already took the vaccine, but he says the following. Listen to this chiddush of the Sfas Emes. The Sfas Emes believes that each vidui is built on the one before. What he understands is, like if you take a pyramid, which is narrow on top and it gets wider on the bottom, what happens is with each successive vidui of the Kohen Gadol, the pyramid gets wider and wider. What does that mean? He starts with Beso, gets to the Kohanim, and then he gets to all of Klal Yisrael. Each vidui subsequent to the previous one is built on the achievement of the previous vidui. It's, so to speak, we gather together forces, and then we move on to conquer the next hill in a battle, right? So the first battle is to achieve kapara on behalf of Beso. Once we achieve kapara for Beso, then our base sort of expands. Now we have tahara, we have purity, but not only the Kohen Gadol, but also Beso. That group sort of, there's a regroup, they get together, so to speak, as one entity, as one unit, and then they move on to the second vidui.
It changed his status, right?
Correct. It now makes you into a tar. And what kind of tara? You've dipped into the great mikveh of Yom Kippurim, and you've achieved that unique purity of Yom Kippurim. Once you've reached that stage, now that group of people, it's like a rock that you throw, into the river, and the ripple effect is that it gets wider and wider and wider. And once you establish from the single Kohen Gadol, the lonely Kohen Gadol, now you achieve a kapara of purity for his entire bias. Now that creates a new force, a new power that can move on to stage number 2. At that stage, we achieve a tara on behalf of the Kohanim, and now we've really expanded our base. So now we have the Kohen Gadol together with Beso, together with the Kohanim, and they together as one expanded unit of tara will now achieve the last vidui on behalf of all Klal Yisrael. But says the Sfas Emes that if one of his wives was excluded, he had 2 wives, and the Torah says that the vidui is only effective for Beso Bais Echad and not Shtei Batim, then he cannot move forward to the next stage to achieve a kapara through the vidui for the Kohen, because he must have he together with Beso. And if the Torah is telling us that he can only achieve a kapara through that very first vidui on behalf of one of his wives, then we haven't gathered together all the troops, and we cannot let the second wife fall by the wayside into the fallback position of the Kohanim, because we cannot move on to achieve the vidui of the Kohanim unless we have the entire group of the Kohen Gadol with his base. Unbelievable.
Like a pagam in his household somehow.
That's right, exactly. His household is not complete. Okay then. So where are we? We're in a big bind, because if he doesn't marry his second wife, then she can't be Besa. And if his first wife dies, he doesn't have a Besa, because Beso means after the Nisuin. But once it's Nisuin, he's got Shtei Batim. And if it's Shtei Batim, then he cannot serve as the Kohen Gadol. Now, let me ask a technical question over here. What's all this fanfare about? What's all this raucous about? What's the big deal? Why doesn't he go into Kedushin? And v'haya, if chas v'sholom, his wife dies, so he'll take the second wife and he'll marry her on Yom Kippur. What's wrong with the Yom Kippur marriage? Do you follow my question? He does the avoda of the night of Yom Kippur. He wakes up in the morning of Yom Kippur, he does the avoda shachris. Then he hears some terrible news. He pulls in the second string wife and he brings her into the chuppah. He effectuates nisuin. He'll let him continue in the avoda. Again, he'll have to take a little pause, maybe a half hour until they organize the chuppah. But they'll do it chick-chock with urgency. So there's an amazing chiddush here of almost all the Rishonim, echad unanimous. He's not allowed to take a woman into the suin on Yom Kippur. Now, this is based on a sugya at the end of Masechet Beitza, and the Gemara tells us that the Rabbanan enacted what's called Shvus, a Gzera, and they excluded all kinyanim, all acquiring possessions on Shabbos, Yom Tov, and certainly on Yom Kippur. You are not allowed to purchase an object on Yom Kippur. Forget about money. You want to give me a gift? I'm not allowed to do a kinyan, agba, b'shicha, masira, whatever kinyan you want. Kinyanim are prohibited. Is it on the list of the 39 malachas? Absolutely not. It's a gzera d'Rabbanan. The Rabbanan were afraid that if you allow you to enter into kinyanim, you might start writing shtaros, and also it interferes with the Shabbos spirit, the Yom, whatever it is. The Gemara at the end of Beitz. No mekach memkar on Shabbos or Yom. Now, Rabosai, I have two problems here. Maybe you could help me solve them. First of all, would the Rabbanan insist that the Kohen Gadol can't get married on Yom Kippur because of a gzera of mekach memkar? I mean, what's at stake over here? We have a
All
mitzvah of
of
avodas Kohen Gadol. Can't we overlook a Nisan Rabbanan for the sake of avodas Kohen Gadol? And I'll tell you even more. This is what really bothers my mind. We have a principle. If you learned Masechet Shabbos, or even better, Masechet Eruvin, the last part of Eruvin, the whole last section of Masechet Eruvin that we did in Daf Yomi is all based on one principle: Ein Shvus b'Migdash. That the Gzeros of Chachamim do not apply inside the walls of the Beis HaMikdash. So you're telling me that if his wife dies, Chas v'Shalom on Yom Kippur, he can't bring his second designated wife into the chuppah because of the Isur of Mekach Memkar, which is only a Shvus d'Rabbanan. It's in the Beis HaMikdash. Why can't he effectuate that marriage in the Beis HaMikdash? These are my questions. In America we say I plead the fifth. I don't know, Alan O'Brien. I don't know. Does that mean anything to you? I plead the fifth. It has to do with the American Constitution. Actually, to be more precise, it has to do with the Bill of Rights. Okay. I can't figure this Gemara out. I mean, what's the issue here? You know, I came up with one technical answer. I'm not sure if it's right, but if it is, I'd like to publish this. It's exciting. What happens if his wife dies in the middle of an avoda? I mean, Shtel Zafar, he's doing what's called the Sayr HaPnimi, right? There are two Seirim, two goats. One gets sent out to the tzuk, what they call it, out to the midbar. Lazazel gets pushed off a cliff. We'll have a lot to talk about that when we get to that. And the second sire, the twin goat, that's brought in the Beis HaMikdash, in the Azara, on the Mizbeach, in the middle of the avoda, he hears the terrible news. His wife died. In that case, the avoda is psula. What we need is to guarantee that the stage was set before Yom Kippur, that in event tragedy befalls and he's married to a second wife, and all the avoda that he does, no matter when his first wife dies, is all kshera because he has a besa. Again, we still have that problem of shtei batim, but I just want to understand why we can't just let well enough be well and let him marry her on Yom Kippur. The answer is, what happens, heaven forbid, in the middle of an avodah? Now, the life gets very complicated because, you know, the word seder. And if I ask you which night of the year, you know, in the time calendar, you know, what calendar date would you choose to associate with the word seder? The night of a Pesach, right? But it's interesting. The Rambam has the word seder in two places. One in Hilchas Chametz U'Matzah, the last parak when he deals with the seder of Leil Tesvav B'Nisan, and he has the word seder in Hilchas Avodas Yom Kippur. Now, again, we're going to have to know the entire Masechet Yoma backwards and forwards to know the answer to the following question: how critical is the seder? Again, I'm not
It's
even going
also
to.
in the Siddur, it's also referred to as a Seder.
Excellent. Right? The avoda that we recite in the Musaf, which is a reminiscent or a duplicate of what went on in the Beis Hamikdash when it stood, it's all about Seder. And again, as I said, you'd have to be a tremendous scholar to know under what situations and circumstances is the Seder, the sequence, absolutely critical. But suffice it to say that many, many different parts of the Avodas Yom Kippurim, Seder is absolutely critical. And if we lose one of the avodos, it creates a ripple effect, almost like an avalanche, and we lose a lot of the avodos. So if his wife dies in the middle of one avoda, that undermines his ability to complete that avoda. It's going to have a ripple effect on other avodas. And therefore, we have to make sure already before Yom Kippur that for the next 24 hours, he is guaranteed that he will function as a Kohen Gadol. Again, we always have to worry that he might contract tumah, but for that we have a second string Kohen Gadol, and even the Chachamim agree as far as that's concerned. But we also have to guarantee that his wife is alive and well, and for that we need a second wife to back up the first one, and that should be set up before Yom Kippur to guarantee that he will be able to serve as a Kohen Gadol for the entirety of Yom Kippur. How do we do it? Because in an event that his first wife dies, you need another bias, and then you're entering into Yom Kippur with two batim, and that's a psul. He cannot serve as a Kohen Gadol if he's married to two wives. How do we get out of this bond? So the Gemara says the Hadar Megarish Lo. He marries her before Yom Kippur, and then he divorces her. What does Gemara have in mind? The most ridiculous piece of Gemara I ever learned in my life. No offense.
How would it help?
Yeah, if you're telling me that he marries her and then he divorces her, so what have you gained over here? You're stuck with one wife. You don't have a second string wife. The Gemara says, Hadra Kushel Leduchta. We're back to square one with the original kasha. How do we solve the problem in event Chas v'Shalom that his wife dies? So you tell me he married a second wife and then he divorced her. Shkoyach. I mean, that's great. The Rav, who married him off is going to make good bucks over here because he gets paid for the kedusha and now he gets paid for the gerushin. He oversees the get. So he wants to get paid doubly. And that's the only guy who gains anything. Yeah, but the Kohen Gadol is not gaining much.
Rabbi, it reminds me of the case of inheritance where you retroactively leave your inheritance to your daughter. So, same thing, you say that the marriage is only a valid marriage if the first wife dies. But if the first wife didn't die, then you alternate that there was no marriage.
Okay, excellent, Alan. All right, you're ahead of the game over here. But I want to tell you now that although you're 100% right, but there are problems here. So hang on, as we say. Lo tzricha de megarish lal tonight. He's going to give her get on tonight, a conditional get. So I thought what he meant by conditional get was that, you know what? In event that my wife lives through Yom Kippur, she survives it, my primary wife, then here's a get for you. And therefore, he's only married to one woman. Do you follow me? But if, on the other hand, his wife dies, then the get is invalid and he's married to the second wife. Pretty cool. The Amar law, hareze gitech, this get will be a valid get. Almanas shetamusi biyom kippur. Okay. So the Kohen Gadol gives his, right? He gives his second wife a get, and he says to her that this get should be valid if you die. So it means that if his second wife dies, then retroactively, the get is a get. So what? How does the Gemara? I'll just read to you the Rashi. I have it in a summary form. The Rashi says, "Im tamus, if she dies, niskayim hatnai, vaget chal me erev Yom Kippurim, v'ein lo el isha achas, v'hi ishto rishona, v'im lo tamus." If she doesn't die, the get is invalid. So he's married to the second wife, and therefore, if his first wife dies, then he has a second wife. I have to go over this one more time. Sorry, fellas. Yeah, I'm trying to get the Gemara's logic down. Again, he gives her a get, and he says that this get is going to be conditional and it'll be valid if you die. He's talking to the second wife. Okay. So now, let's just see. If she dies, the get is chal lemafreya. Okay? So then he was only married to one wife. That's fine. If she doesn't die, let's assume the first wife will die, then the get is not valid and he's married to the second wife. You follow? So in other words, who dies over here? That's what's asking the question, which of these two women are going to die? If the second wife dies, then the get was Chala Mafreya because there was a Kiyum Atnai and he was only married to the first wife. If the first wife dies and the second wife is alive, then the get is not valid because he only gave her a get al Tanai in Tamusi and she didn't die. The first wife died. But I don't get it. Maybe neither of them will die. Right? So again, the get is only chal if she'll die. Now she survived, and the get is not valid. If the get is not valid, then he's married to the second wife. Maybe his first wife will survive, and his second wife will survive. I don't get it. Vidilma lo maisa. Maybe his second wife won't die. If his second wife doesn't die, then the get is invalid, which means he's married to the second wife. And now God is with us, and the first wife didn't die either. Is again, Havile Shnei Batim. He's married to 2 wives. I don't get it. The premise of this Gemara, which the Gemara rejects it, but I'm just saying, what was the premise? What we call a Havamim, that one of the 2 wives will die. And if one of the 2 wives will die, he has only 1 wife, which is perfect. So he gives the first wife a get, such that if she dies, he was never married to her, which is great because then he entered into Yom Kippur with only 1 wife. If, on the other hand, she survives, then the get is not valid, but his first wife died. I don't get it. It's a very strange Havamim that, the Gemara is assuming. Look, Rabbi, I didn't write the script, so you can't blame me. You can only empathize. The Gemara somehow is assuming that one of the 2 wives is going to die.
Hey, Rabbi, if the get should be valid only if no one dies. If one person dies, then you don't need a get. You want to be married to one person and you don't need a get. But if no one dies, then you need a get.
That's not exactly so, Alan, because if one of them dies, he entered into Yom Kippur with 2 wives, right? She died at time T1, whenever it was. But up until that time, he was married to 2 wives, so he was disqualified. It's not, in other words, there's no simple solution here to this problem. Because on the one hand, he has to have a second wife, but on the other hand, he can't have a second wife. Let's see, Ella. The Gemara now comes up with a different formulation. Maybe we'll do better with the second possibility. Ella says the Gemara, the Amar Law, he says to his second wife, Hareze gitech almanas shalotamusi, on the condition that you won't die. The exact opposite of the first formulation. The first formulation was almanas shetamusi, and now he's giving a get almanas shalotamusi, and therefore
that's a marriage that has no chance.
Wait, just give me 1 minute, and then I'll be right with you. So therefore, Elo Maisa, he gave her a get on the condition that she doesn't die, and she didn't die. And therefore, the T'nai was fulfilled. She didn't die. He gave her a get on the condition that she didn't die, and she didn't die. So the get is Chal Umegar Shalom. So he only has 1 wife. The I Maisa, and if in fact she dies, right, again, the get was given to her El T'nai that she shouldn't die. So if she dies, then the get is invalid. Is Kaima Hach. Now he has his first wife, I assume the Gemara means, and he's only married to 1 wife. So again, he gave her a get on the condition that she won't die, because then he circumvents the problem of being married to 2 wives. So if she doesn't die, he wants to make sure that she's divorced. Now, what happens if she dies? If she dies, then the get is invalid. If the get is invalid, then he's in great shape, because now he's married to the second wife. And if his first wife dies, so he's married to the second wife. So Gemara rejects this as well. Vidilma Hilo Maisa, maybe his second wife won't die, and therefore the gerushin is invalid because he gave a get almanas shalota musi. Just 1 second. Dilma Hilo Maisa. Oh, so she doesn't die. Oh, if she doesn't die, we said the get is valid. Is Havile Gita Dahai? Gita. So the get that he gave to his second wife is a valid get. Umaisa chaverta ukamle below bias. We're worried about the possibility that his wife might die. Well, guess what? His second wife didn't die. And if his second wife didn't die, then the get is valid. If the get is valid, then he's not married to the second wife. And again, he was very excited about setting up that tonight because he wanted to make sure that he wouldn't be married to two wives. So he set up a get. Yeah, but what happens now? The whole institution is to cover you in case his wife dies. Well, if she dies, he's left without a bias. We're caught in between a rock and a hard place because we can't have two wives, but we can't have zero wives. We got to end up with one wife. Ella, says the Gemara, the Omar law al menas shetomus achas miken. Oh, now we have a breakthrough. He gives her a get, his second wife, and he says to her, this get is valid on the condition that one of the two wives will die in Yom Kippur. And therefore, Maisa ha kaima ha. If his second wife dies, then he has his first wife. Maisa ha. If his first wife dies, ha kaima ha. He has his second wife. Wow. This is cool. Let's again. Somehow this is a brain tweeze. Are they pulling the wool over our eyes here? Because it sounds like it finally hit the fan. You know, he's got.
So he does this. He does this for both of them.
I don't think so. I didn't get that impression. It says the Amar La in singular. He's talking to his second wife. He's always been talking to his second wife. He's not giving a get to his first wife. He gives a get to his second wife. And he says that this get will be valid if one of the two of you will die. So that if the second wife dies, then the get is Chalam Afreya, and he's only married to the first wife. If the first wife dies, then the get to the second wife is invalid, and he's married to the second wife. So he's always going to be left with one wife. The Dilma lo Maisa v'lo chad minayu. Again, he gave her a get, and the get is going to be valid if one of the two of them die. What happens if they both survive? Then the get is not valid, and he's married to two wives. Ah, too bad. Shucks. I got so excited. Like I was really, I was going to bring out the 7-piece band over here. Now the Gemara has another objection. He says, the whole purpose of giving the second wife a get is so that the get should be valid. In event that his first wife survives, it's not a get. Why not? Omar Rava. Now we have to get heavy into the laws of Tanayim and Gittin. You know, to make a condition in a get is not such a simple thing. You have to really know the halachas. You got to pay a good lawyer for this. Omar Rava. Rava says, "Harezek yitecha menashelo tishte yayin kol yimei chayai v'chayaychi." He gives her a get, and he says, I want a commitment. You're not going to drink wine for the rest of your life, and neither will I. I guess they were both addicts. I don't know. Ein ze krisus. The get is not chal. It's not valid. Why? Because there's never a moment in time when you can be absolutely sure that the get severs the relationship between the husband and the wife. Any t'nai has to allow for some period at some moment in time during the course of the marriage when the get could be chal. That's called krisus. There's got to be at least a possibility. Here, there's an impossibility. You can never point out a moment in time when for sure the t'nai was fulfilled. Because up until the day of her death, up until the day of his death, no wine. So she's always suspended in midair. She doesn't know whether the get will be chal or not, because tomorrow she may break the promise and drink the wine. Here also, One second. But Rava says, Kol Yemei Chaye Ploni, I'm going to give you a get on the condition, like she works in one of these, what do they call those organizations where they help people, break addictions. So she's a volunteer in that organization, and she has a victim, who's never caught up. He's a Talmud, he's a patient of Dr. Tversky, if you know what I'm talking about. And she took it upon himself that she would be committed day and night to make sure that he breaks his addiction. So the husband gave her a get. She's very excited about the get, but the condition is that she will successfully break his addiction. How will she ever know that that's coming to be? The answer is Kol Yimei Chayav, as long as he's alive. So the possibility exists that he may die, and if he dies, then the Tanai was Makuyim because he never had a drop of wine until the day he died. Now let's plug it back to our case. A man says to his wife, I'm giving you a get, and it depends on if you'll die or not. Almanasha Tamus. That means that for the entire course of her life, she is completely bound to him, because the get could only be chal when she dies. But during her lifetime, she'll never be able to determine whether the get is valid because the Tanai was not fulfilled. The Tanai will only be fulfilled when they say Yiskadal v'Yiskadash at her deathbed. So you're telling me that that the Kohen Gadol is going to give his second wife a get, Almanasha Tamusi, that the get will be chal if and when you die. That's not krisus. Ella, says the Gemara, the Omar law, he says to his second wife, I'm giving you a get on the condition that your friend does not die. Why? Because if your friend, right, the first wife doesn't die, then the Kohen Gadol is married to two wives, so he has to give her a get. So he gives her a get, and he says, if the first wife survives and through the entire Yom Kippur, then here's your get. So he's not married to two wives. E lo maisa chaverta. So it comes out that if her colleague, meaning the first wife, survives, then the get is chal. So the Kohen Gadol is only married to one wife. The imaisa ha, and let's say the first wife dies, hakaima ha. Then the Tanai is batel because he made a Tanai. Amana shelo tamus chaverta, and she, the first wife, died. So if the first wife died, that undermines the kiyuma Tanai, which means that the get is not chal, and he's married to the second wife. So Mimanachach, he has only one wife. Whoa, this is a good one. It's just like brain tweezers, Let's just go over this one more time. He gives her a get, the second wife, and he says that this get should be chal if the first wife survives, correct? Because if the first wife survives, he wants the get to be chal, so he's only married to the first wife, not to the second. If the first wife dies, then the get is invalid and he's married to the second wife. So the Gemara throws this out. Why? Vidilma Maisa Chaverta Bipalgad Avoda. Oh, Rabbosai, do you remember I suggested what happens if she dies in the middle of the Avoda? Oh, so what happens? Well, let's just hold on, hold the horses here. She dies in the middle of the Avoda. Igloi Miltza. Now we have to turn to Daf Yud Gimel Beis. Igloi milsalam afreya. Now he gave her get almanas shelo Thomas chaverta, and therefore, if her friend dies, the get is invalid. The Tanai was not fulfilled, and he's married to the second wife. Okay. Gola milsam afreya the gita gaha lav gita. Avi ovid leavoda b'shnei batim. Brilliant. Rabosi, you hear what's going on? What happens is that if you invalidate the get to the second wife, then you get a problem. Because when he started the avoda, he was married to two wives. The get is not valid. He only gave her a get al tonight. Shalot Thomas chaverta. Now she died. Now, from the moment of her death and on, he's only married to the second wife. That's fine. But when he started the avoda, he was married to two wives. Why? Because the death of his first wife triggers off a bittul atnai, so that the get is valid. So that the kedushin is valid. You have that? Because again, he gave her a get on the condition that his first wife wouldn't die. If his first wife dies, then the get is invalid, so that he has another wife. He needs one wife. But the problem is that once you invalidate the Tanai, then Lemafreya, there was no get. The get never got off the ground. And if the get didn't get off the ground, then for the first half of the avoda, he was married to two wives. Oh my goodness. Ella, says the Gemara, try. This is an unbelievable sugya, Rabosai. It's like,
Rabbi, I didn't understand that. Doesn't it
over it one
go
more time?
back?
He's saying that
I don't understand.
If the get is invalid because of bittul atnai, and then when he married her, which was before Yom Kippur, that marriage is valid. So anything up to the point of time when his first wife died, he was married to two wives.
Was married to two.
That's not good.
He really was married to two.
Ella, the Omar law, hareze gitech, almanas shetomus chavertech. Okay, before we said it was hareze gitech, almanas shalot tomus chavertech. Now it's hareze gitech, almanas shetomus chavertech. If the first wife dies on Yom Kippur, then the get is valid. So if the first wife dies, then the get is valid. I don't know how this is going to solve that problem, because if his first wife dies, then that validates the get, and he's not married to any wife. He has no wives. No wife. Dilma Maisa Chaverta. If his first wife dies, then the get is Makuyam, the Tanai is Makuyam. Havile Gita. The Gita. Right? The get is Chal. Vikamle below bias. He has no bias at all. Ella, says the Gemara, de Megarish Lula Chavayu. Oh, this is Yisrael, what you were saying before, that maybe he gives two gittin to both of these wives.
Exactly. For sure.
Okay, so wait. Give it a minute. The Megarish Nei Bativ. So he's going to be Megarish, both wives on Erev Yom Kippur. That's not good, because then he's left with no wife.
No, he's they're both getting off tonight.
Okay.
So it was going to come into effect, guaranteed to come into effect.
Oh.
Whoever.
So let's give me a minute to work out the tonight. It says Lachada, for one of these two women, Okay, I assume he means the shnia because we're always talking about the second wife. So he says to her, "Omalo areza gitech almanas shelo tamus chavert." In other words, if she'll survive, my first wife will survive, then your get is valid, and therefore we're not married. Oh, now he comes back to his first wife. Omar lo, he says to her, "Reza gitech almanas shaloti konsi lebeis hakneses." Then on Yom Kippur you don't go into the shul. All right, what does that do for me? Umeata im lo tamus harishona niskayim atnai shel hashniya yachulu gerishah lemafreya. So his first wife survived it, and therefore the get is chal vis-a-vis the second wife, because the Tanai was almanas shelo tamus chaverta, and the first wife survived. So the get is chal lemafreya, and he only has one wife. Now, if this first wife dies, then the get to the second wife is bata. Why? Because he made a Tanai in that get. Almanas shelo tamus chaverta, and she died. Now, let's think what happens. If the first wife dies and he's in the middle of the avoda, which means that the get is chal vis-a-vis the second wife, because that was given as get almanas. Just 1 second. Almanas shelo tamus chaverta. So wait a minute. Now his wife dies, the first wife, and that means that the original marriage is intact. Why? Because the get is batel. The Tanai was lo tamus, and now his first wife died. So at this point, he has. But wait a second. Why wasn't he married to two wives? Almanas shelo tamus chaverta. Me'achar v'gam osa gerishin al Tanai shelo tikonas lebeis haknesses. We came shelo nichnesa lebeis haknesses harei megureshes lemafreya. His first wife dies, and that's going to activate the get to his first wife. Why? Because he said, "Almanas shelo tikonti lebeis haknesses," and once she dies, then that condition will be fulfilled. The condition to the second wife was shelo tamus chaverta, but she died, so that condition was not fulfilled. The get is therefore validated. Just 1 second. The get is validated. She died. And no, why is the get? The get is invalidated. Why is the get invalidated? Right? And she died. So therefore, if she died, it means that the bittul atnai, it means that there was a bittul atnai in the gerushin, and therefore the marriage is a valid marriage. So he's now married to the first wife. Is he also married to the second wife? Well, he's married to the second wife. Is he also married to the first wife? Well, the answer is he gave a get to his first wife. And the get was conditional on the fact that she won't come into the Beis HaKnesset, which now she can't do because she's already gone. So the Gemara rejects this too. I see. We're gonna have to end this with this next piece of Gemara here. Bidilma lo ma'isa chaverta. Now, if his first wife, does not die, so then the get that he gave to his second wife was almanas shelo tamus chaverta. So it means that now that she died, the Tanai was not fulfilled. The Tanai in the get was not fulfilled. And therefore, Therefore, he's married to 2 wives. He's going to marry to 2 wives. No, just 1 second. If his first wife does not die, below Ayla he, the Beis HaKnesset, and she doesn't go into the Beis HaKnesset the whole day. If that be the case, then Havile Gita de Travayu Gita. The Gemara is arguing that both Gittin are now validated. Now, I understand why the first wife's get is validated, because it was Almanash Lo Tikonsi, and she doesn't go into the Beis HaKnesset. So the get is now validated. Now, the get he gave to his second wife was Almanash Lo Tamusu Shelo Tamus Chaverta. And she didn't die. So the get is valid. So now the get is validated to both of his wives. He's Havi Le below bias, come Le below bias. He's not married to either one. Okay, I don't know at what point we'll finally come to some resolution. So I'll keep you in suspense and myself in suspense until Mirza Hashem next week. So you'll all think about this brain tweezer over the course of the week. You won't be able to sleep at night. And Mirza Hashem will come up with a solution by next week.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. This is a real doozy of a sugya. Brain tweezer.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Yeah, thank you so much. Very exciting sugya.